Majority of the world's rural poor depend on agriculture and natural resources for their livelihoods. As a marginalized and geographically dispersed community, they face major social and economic problems which hinders from improving their lives and that of their families. According to a report from the World Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO), this reality is particularly challenging African women, youth, and indigenous peoples, as they often bear the bitter taste of economic disparity that hinder equal access to land, resources, education, information, and opportunities to participate in development process. Having access to financial services helps people improve their lives and reduce poverty, as it has been witnessed in the social progress achieved in South Asia in the past 4 decades. The experience of South Asian countries like Bangladesh and other regions demonstrate that microfinance can deliver positive effects when it is combined and integrated effectively with other economic and social programs. Since the emergence of microfinance modalities as a means of reaching rural communities in recent years, many Africans are getting the chance to use small funds to change their lives accordingly. Microfinance, which is the provision of a variety of financial services to destitute low-income people and micro and small enterprises that lack access to banking and related services, is proving vital to empowering communities. Experts agree that microfinance, when properly utilized, can economically empower individuals and small enterprises in enabling them contribute to and fairly benefit from economic development.
It's very clear that the microfinance industry is growing. The focus on the underserved and the unserved markets has increased. So there is certainly acceptance and the realization that microfinance has got a very big part to play in terms of financial inclusion and, of course, the economic development of any country for that matter.
Major product that we actually offer is lending. We have various products for lending, which span from group loans, micro enterprise loans. We also do some salary-based loans as well, and also loans for the SMEs.
There's a lot of saturation in particular areas, in regions, like in the town centers, because there's possibility of many organizations within the same region. But I think when you go to the rural areas where they actually deserve, all these services, the presence is still very scanty.
The UN's report on microfinance argues that this relatively new trend offers significant opportunities for African countries to fully unleash the private sector's potential and contribute to addressing emerging and long-lasting development challenges such as poverty, income inequality, high levels of unemployment, particularly amongst its youth.
The low-income people, or even those segments which were underserved, or some of them were not served at all in terms of financial services, they also need to be capacitated so that they can be economically, enabled, to sustain, their living. So our intervention is to enable them to be viable in terms of whatever they are doing. So we come in there in terms of technical assistance, in terms of financial assistance, so that they can, be able to do their, projects, as it were.
In Africa, there are several people, several adults, approximately 330 million adults lack access to a bank account. There are also millions of SMEs and MSMEs who lack access to funding. We do have a mandate to enhance access to financial services by lower income population. And in that regard, we have several types of financial instruments to support financial institutions and SMEs provide financial services to the unbanked.
Despite the disparity within regions of the continent, African governments have set goals to reach their people living in the hard-to-reach areas through investments in the sector. They've made the playing ground suitable for the private sector to operate as well.
We've seen these days a great improvement in terms of regulation, because regulation was the greatest challenge faced by the MFIs to operate in order to easily operate in different environments.
Also, good development that they're actually putting in place is to do with the collateral registry system. Obviously, if you are looking at markets where you are going rural, in the rural areas, you are actually looking at individuals probably who are limited in terms of having assets which are well registered. But if we are then able to tap into the assets, the movable assets that they have in their possessions, and we are able to register even in terms of collateral, it certainly goes a long way in trying to unlock the value that is actually in those assets. So I think those are the good initiatives that we actually have. And
in Africa, regulation varies from one country to another. In some countries, like in West Africa, there is a central bank, which is common to a number of countries, I think 8 countries. And their regulation is the same for everyone. So in the other countries, there is no integration, and each country will have their own regulation.
Ethiopia has been very good at putting regulation together and making sure that there's harmony in terms of and sharing knowledge about the microfinance industry here. In other countries that are trying to establish an apex institution of a microfinance institution can learn a lot from what, let's say, for example, Ethiopia has actually done in terms of having an industry that has been sharing information. But again, being able to attract investors in a particular country, I think it's important to have one voice and doing things together, because an investor wants to come and look at that market as a whole.
For a continent with close to 70% young population, where majority of them living in rural areas, microfinance institutions, MFIs, are presenting opportunities in the agriculture, energy, and micro and small enterprises level, helping the youth transform itself using small funds it borrows from them.
Especially in the rural setups, it's more of agriculture. And also some who are actually into, production. You look at things like peanut butter making. You also look at poultry, piggery, and animal husbandry. And I think the majority of them, if we are looking at the rural finance schemes that we actually have, the majority, that is where they actually deploy their funds. Some in the areas of agriculture, we also have individuals who are actually into irrigation schemes. And I think the majority of them, this is where probably they need assistance in terms of buying their irrigation pipes, the pumps. You also look at inputs, buying the inputs, the fertilizers, and the like.
We are very keen on particular sectors in which these microfinance institutions are operating. Some of the key sectors that we care about is agriculture. The reason we do that is because we know a lot of the farming activities are not financially included from the formal financial sector. And so we try to focus our money to go to programs that are promoting agriculture. Another area that we think perhaps has good social impact is education. So if you have microfinance institutions in with the programs that are trying to promote education, let's say school fees loans, or people to be able to go back to education, that's an area that we try to finance.
The African microfinance industry is diverse and geographically dispersed. A variety of approaches, ranging from the use of agent and village community banks, and traditional group-based systems to specialized lending by various institutions. Despite the institutions operating in the traditional sphere, technology-based actors, better known as fintechs, by those in the area, are also coming on board, diversifying the capacity and accessibility of service provision.
Mobile network operators changed the game because they are bringing now solutions, financial solutions, where the formal microfinance sector is not yet to offer the services. And we have now a new trend, which are bigger banks, bigger or regional banks, which are also opening or starting microfinance activities.
Today, the digital technology allows financial services providers to know their customers better, to track their activity, to build data from which they can assess the creditworthiness of their clients, rather than, for instance, requiring excessive collateral. They can build systems to assess creditworthiness. And I believe today MFIs can highly rely on big data to address the financial inclusion gap.
Africa is among the country that have the highest penetration rate in terms of mobile phones. So this is very important this is a great opportunity for the MFIs. They can leverage these opportunities.
So with our software, everything within the microfinance institutions is automated, and all does have to do the microfinance managers and accountants and other people working for microfinance institutions. And when they come to work in the morning, just open the computer, they get connected to the servers, and they have all the information they need to serve their clients. So it's a mission-critical application that needs to work perfectly on a daily basis. So beside that, we also provide mobile banking applications that will allow microfinance and beneficiaries, that means people who bank, who get financial services through microfinance institutions, to access to their accounts through their mobile phones.
This has come both as a challenge and an opportunity for those institutions that are to have physical presence in the places they serve through branch.
So right now there's so much opportunity, and just to enumerate some of the benefits that you can get from this, I've talked about low cost, which is extremely low. I've talked about speed, but microfinance banks can use it to actually move funds back and forth. They can use the platform to actually raise funds. That's one thing that microfinance institutions really need. They can actually raise money on this platform, and it also helps them to collaborate. So one microfinance bank can work with another microfinance bank on the platform and give a joint loan to somebody instead of bearing all the risk. So the platform is very flexible, and it allows lots of things to be done on it.
Technology is here to stay, and it's dynamic. It's going to continue to improve. If you're going to, as an organization, to stick to your old way of doing things, I think you become extinct. So yes, Zimbabwe is also a growing market, and we're facing the same. It's not a challenge. It's a level of development worldwide. So we have telecoms, we have got fintech companies. Personally, my view is that I don't look at them as competitors. I think we collaborate. I may be weak in one area, which can be covered by a fintech company. So if we collaborate, I think that's the way to go. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, so we do have those developments in terms of fintech companies, MNOs also coming into the space. But I think it's more of working together.
So the traditional microfinance industry needs to rebuild itself to face, especially try to use technology so that they can continue offer services to the poorest in the very remote areas of Africa. And if they do not rebuild themselves, if they do not embrace the technology to leverage the outreach, they may be seriously threatened in the coming years because of the other big players are pretty doing the same job. They are also targeting the people on the bottom of the poverty line, offering them tailor-made services.
Obviously need to actually embrace the technology as well. Why? Because it actually comes with it the benefits in terms of reduction, in terms of cost reduction. So I think technology is actually a good development. We would really look forward to also even partnering with some of the fintechs so that we can also ride on the technology so that we can be able to, instead of us looking at growing in terms of establishing the physical branches, which are even more expensive, we are keen to actually identify other methods of delivering our products which are actually cost-effective.
Operators in the sector speak about the challenges they face and the gaps that both governments and the actors must bridge in order to leverage what microfinance institutions have to do for those underprivileged members of the community.
For the microfinance institutions, in terms of our licensing with the regulator, we still have 1-year licenses which we actually renew on an annual basis. And obviously this gives us challenges probably if you are looking at aspects to do with trying to source funding.
You know, in Africa generally, infrastructure is a problem. Good roads, electricity, water, and all that. But we are trying to surmount that because we have introduced, like you said, the telecom operators. We brought them on board. There's something we call the mobile money in Central Bank, mobile banking. So we can reach the grassroots and the interiors on your mobile handsets, and then some people go around to educate them.
Urgent areas is really capacity. Before you can access funding to develop your business, there has to be some type of capacity built to provide confidence to the financial institution, to financial service providers to support you as a microfinance entity. So governments need to have the right policies for financial and digital literacy, develop their human capital strategies, develop some type of incubators for the youth to allow them to have bankable projects. So for me, these are priority areas that needs to be addressed along with the financing.
As they are established mainly for profit, the interest rates of microfinance institutions are high, which concern African governments.
They are in the business for profit making, you understand? So the central bank intervening on behalf of the federal government is to bring down those exorbitant interest rates and to make the credit readily available to the sector that is to be channeled out. So central bank comes in to bring down the interest rates. Like for instance, most of the intervention schemes for central bank, where they float bonds and raise the credit, the interest rate is pegged at between 7 and 9%, as against what the deposit money banks will charge, running from 22 to 24%. You know, this to make it available to the grassroots.
Actors who already know the African microfinance market say there is yet untapped potential for newcomers for many good reasons.
I have actually observed that the market is still quite huge, and in some cases you may not even be able to exhaust the whole market by yourself, or even the existing players who are currently there at the moment. They do have different strategies. They do have different target markets. Some of them, they're actually looking at a niche market. So I think there's still an opportunity for new players to actually come on board and also try to offer new products that suit certain segments of the market.
If you look at the financial access, is still very low. And it's, as I said, it's different from country to country. I think in Kenya, for instance, the financial access has been improving purely because of the innovative ways in which delivery of microfinance products have been done through mobile technology and all that stuff. In other countries in West Africa, for instance, where there is no such facilities or technology, the access is still very low. So even in Kenya, where the access seemingly is a bit high, we still have huge unmet demand. So in my view and from our experience, there's still huge, there's still huge chances for organizations to expand the outreach.
According to the UN, microfinance institutions in Africa still lack the capacity to match the needs of low-income people as they suffer from structural weaknesses. African governments, in cooperation with development partners, could therefore play a fundamental role in consolidating the microfinance sector by providing even appropriate policies and regulatory and legal frameworks in addition to availing soft and hard infrastructure for the institutions to operate. Even though microfinance alone would not fundamentally transform African economies, it can play an essential part for the foreseeable future in providing basic financial services to the unprivileged and thereby help advance the continent's development goals.
Our continent has been growing steadily over the last decades, growing in terms of population, growing in terms of economic growth, and also growing in aspirations and in ambitions. Our ambitions and aspirations are captured in what we call here in the African Union, the Agenda 2063, which is Africa's agenda and strategy for development and well-being for all Africans. In order to implement the Agenda 2063 and to achieve the aspirations of our populations in Africa, infrastructure comes as the backbone and the most important common thread that is needed not only to connect our continent, but also to ensure the well-being of our population. Infrastructure, as you know, links people, links markets, facilitates trade, integrates regions and countries, and make people things as simple as accessing electricity, going to school, so you take a road, talking to someone or connecting our financial systems needs ICT, and so on and so forth. So that's why I'm saying it's the backbone, and that's what lies the foundation for the development and the well-being of the population. Aware of this and cognizant of the importance of infrastructure, and particularly the regional and continental infrastructure, the heads of states in various meetings culminating in a summit agreed to the PIDA program, to this program for infrastructure development in 2012. I must first say that it's a strategy, so it's a whole program, and the program is phased into different periods. We have short-term, what we call the priority infrastructure, and there's the medium-term, and there's the long-term. It's a very costly and program. So the program, well, you probably know already that the financial gap needed to implement, the infrastructure for the continent is almost like $90 billion each year. But anyway, this program, so far, we have already implemented some of the priority projects. Some have been achieved. Even we have a hydropower dam in Dini that was already implemented. We have many transport projects that have been implemented. We have progress on many of the important corridors, like the Cairo to Tape corridor, and more importantly, we mobilized most of the stakeholders are fully mobilized. We have the commitment, the political commitment, and now PIDA is recognized, and it is the only reference for the whole continent as the program for the continent for infrastructure. PIDA focuses on the regional and the continental infrastructure, whereas countries focus on their own national infrastructure. So we're making a distinction here. Why? Why we're putting emphasis, and this program supports mainly the regional and continental infrastructure, because that Africa is made of so many countries. They are small economies in most of them, small also in number of population, distant, they are not connected. So, and it's not an easy task to be undertaken by one country. You need several countries to be connected together, or to access a grid together, or to have a network together. So PIDA focuses on regional and continental programs. Now, for that also, it's not easy. It's not just about the financial challenge of these countries together. It's also about all the procedures, the regulations, the harmonization of policies to make, for instance, a road work between several countries seamlessly. You need special also mechanisms to implement a multi-country or a regional project that is not necessarily, the technical expertise may not necessarily be available in one country. So what we do here at the AU is we provide capacity building to ensure that the projects, could be implemented and managed properly. Along with other stakeholders, we have a facility that helps with the preparation of the projects to make them bankable. Why? One of the main challenges, again, for regional and continental programs, due to their complexity, these are very much different from the national projects. Due to their complexity and other factors, they need to be very well prepared to make them bankable. Otherwise, they will not attract investors or financiers. So we have established this, we provide, a facility that to help with the preparation and the bankability of these projects to be ready for finance. So the capacity building, the preparations for bankability, mobilizing, as I said, the political commitment, and also trying as much as possible to work across globally, to attract investments to the continent. The PIDA, because it covers transport, ICT, energy, and transboundary water, the PIDA has been developed with all these actors. So it's not just the AU who has developed the programs. The program and the projects included in the PIDA, they undergone an intensive consultative process, and the rest are part and parcel of all of the whole program. So is the AFDB, the African Development Bank, who is the main financiers and implementer of the PIDA. So is the NEPAD, who is also, these are the main players, and we are all talking, as I said, is the sole reference. So all of us are implementing the exact same programs. For instance, a hydropower dam that's very successful, that was implemented in West Africa. I mentioned also the North-South corridor transport. There's also the one from the Atlantic Ocean, linking also Tangier to Dakar, and so on and so forth. Each part, or the missing links, as we technically call them, they are covered by either the country in question or the region direct in question, and together we help implement this huge program. That is, being a regional and continental program has been subjected to consultation and also agreement among all the rest. So roles and who is doing what, and the priorities, because you said they having their own priorities. They may be having some priorities, but what is in the PIDA constitutes also their priority. We cannot continue relying on international or external aid. But I would like to say something that is very important. Actually, particularly for infrastructure, countries have been putting a lot from their national budgets into infrastructure. Almost 70% of the finance of infrastructure in the continent comes from the national budgets and not from external sources. So we do have to recognize also the commitment of our countries towards towards infrastructure. I agree with you that it's not enough, though. It's not enough because our needs are huge. And they are growing as well. They are growing. I did mention the number of people and the markets growing. Also, we have aspirations, particularly like, for instance, industrialization or high-tech issues. So for these, we also need more infrastructure as well. So our countries have been doing a lot. We still need, of course, external aid, but what we need also is not to be reliant only on external aid. So this is for the first point. The second point I wanted to make is that for the PIDA, we have been mobilizing resources in many ways. We did mention external funding. We also working with our own private sector in the continent and private sector from abroad. For infrastructure, the very first phases of any project in infrastructure, the investment is huge. At the onset, the investment is huge. So that's why it's always challenging. Comes the role of the development banks. We have the African Development Bank, who has been investing heavily, in the PIDA program. But we're calling for the private sector also to come into in the finance of infrastructure. So far, most of the investments of the private sector in infrastructure in Africa focused most of them went into ICT because it's a quick win, so the revenue comes quickly. But we need them also to invest in longer-term projects, even though we know that at the beginning, as I said, there's heavy costs. For that, we need to improve our investment climate. And all of us, we are working with our national, with the countries to improve the investment climate in order to attract investment and also to reduce the risks, knowing that these are important amounts of money, especially that most of this money would be invested upfront. Okay, so the improvement of the investment climate is key as well. We also the continent has set now the Africa 50, which is also the instrument to where the African Development Bank and main African players to ensure that we have the funds needed or a large amounts of funds needed through private finance to be availed to infrastructure. We have new, like emerging countries as well, who are increasingly being attracted to Africa. Remember, when we talk about this gap in finance, or when you talk about the gap in infrastructure, they should be understood as investment opportunities. This is the continent that has almost the most attractive investment opportunities almost anywhere in the globe, in any sector, particularly in infrastructure. So that's why we are repackaging and reselling, these projects as real investment opportunities, and we should make them as such. And that's why I said it's important. It's important also to improve our investment climate, rules and procedures and laws to allow these investments to come, because they will not find such opportunities. For instance, in the energy sector, here at the AU, we have a program to harmonize the policies and rules and regulations for energy across the continent. We already started phase one. Phase one was to develop an action plan. The action plan now is ready. We're getting into phase two and to implement the phase two for the harmonization of policies for the energy sector. We are also have several programs going direct to the capacity building of teams to work on regional and continental programs. So these are the two of the. And I did also mention to you the preparation facility, the IPPF, the infrastructure facility, the infrastructure to prepare projects, grants to be bankable, to be ready for investment. Our heads of states are adamant, and they do recognize the importance of PIDA implementation. There are challenges. I mentioned some of them throughout our interview. Yes, there are challenges. I am confident. I'm very confident. I'm even greatly optimistic. Why? Why? Because I would like us to also recognize any project in the world, wherever it is, is risky and challenging. Of course, the risks, the nature of the risks and the nature of challenges vary from one project to another, one region to another. We cannot keep on labeling our continent or our projects always as challenging and risky. I am sorry, this would have to stop. Our projects represent the highest and best opportunity for investment almost anywhere in the world. And we are working together, all of us in the continent, to make sure to attract these investments to the continent. That's why I'm saying I am optimistic. And I would like us, once and for all, to really look at them as such, and not as always they are challenging, Africa is risky, not at all. Judging by all the progress that we're seeing here in Addis Ababa and in Ethiopia in general, doing a great job. Look at the growth rates. Look at the investments coming to the country. So they are doable. We're doing them, and we are going to continue doing them. And I am very hopeful and optimistic.